Nicholas, Lionel, Taj, Ed, if you want to prepare yourself for the Inquisition, there are roving mics, or as I like to call them, pretty blondes, with microphones. So raise your, if you've got if you put your hand up if you've got a question. John, they are all lots of questions that are held by John at the back in the media hub, but don't feel you can't ask them in person. It'll be much better to have them and know who you are and where you're from. Who's up first? I can't see very well because of the blinding lights.
Projector's going off.
Who we got? Simon?
Hey, hi. I'm Simon from Domino's. To Lionel, I think you're a star. You talked about the challenge in producing so much creative, and you have 70-odd pieces of creative across God knows how many markets. How are you resourcing and meeting that creative challenge that you have when you've got to produce so much content?
Well, that's a very good question, because by applying that model, we need to really look at how we set up the team. So we went from a kind of generalist marketing type of profile in the team in really specialized. So we really have people that are dedicated to that sales activation layer that is bought through programmatic, essentially, but also a few additions to that is bought more traditionally. And that are really focused on looking and having a content calendar on what is it that is interesting to our audience and that we need to talk about. So we kind of plan 6 months ahead and have briefs by batch that we deliver to the agency so that we can produce a lot of this content in a very systematic way. So it's kind of starting to industrialize the thing and having as many creative as we think there are interesting things to talk about.
Have you bought that creative in-house yet?
So we have a design team in-house which helps do this creative because making all of that through agency can be pretty time-consuming and expensive. So as there is a lot of repetition in the way we actually approach the content, we tend to replicate and adapt some of the creative ideas internally in terms of production.
Yeah, it's Ian from Maria has a question for Nicholas. What's your view on discretionary payments? So, I mean, the example would be something like Radiohead with their album a couple of years back where people paid for what they thought it was worth. Do you think that's a viable model? And is there an example of people using that?
So the question is very focused on pay what you want strategies used by Radiohead for on Rainbows and a number of other things. My starting point is that customers have no idea how much something is worth. I mean, none at all. So I'm going to boast now. I'm going to the Gavroche for dinner now this evening with my wife. It was a Christmas present. It's taken this long to us to find a babysitter, but we're going this evening. The bottle of wine I have there will be the same bottle of wine I could buy in Sainsbury's, and I'm going to pay a lot more money for it. And the point is that context and looking around other people and how much I want to impress my wife versus Justin, who might want to spend more to impress now he's newly single. He might spend a different amount of money. All of those things matter. And in the context of pay what you want, you're sitting there with this thing and going, I don't know, how's the amount of an album worth? 10 quid? 50 quid? Nothing? I mean, all of the above is a possible answer. We've seen a second phase of this. An example from games is the Humble Bundle, where it says, here's 5 games, pay what you want. It's got 3 sliders, how much you want to give the devs, how much you want to give the organiser, the Humble Bundle, and how much you want to give charity. But it doesn't just stop there. It says the average spent is $10. Well, I'm more than average. So the average consistently goes up over the period of the campaign because everybody wants to spend a tiny bit more, which drives it up, which is very clever. You can play around with how much you want to be negative around people. They often put a little price point in, which is that if you spend more than the average, you get an extra thing, which again tends to drive it up over time. And then they have other things which says who spent the most money. And there's a chart of the top 10 spenders. Marcus Persson. Does anybody know who Marcus Persson is? Also known as Notch. He created Minecraft. Richest gamer in the world, probably. He's always at the top. I mean, always, like $20,000. The next person is nearly always somebody who spent $1,337. If you understand why, then you're a proper gamer. I'm impressed. You just don't, do you? It means leet in leet speak, which is a long and complex way of saying I'm awesome. But take it from me, 1337 is an important number. And then you get other figures in there. Somebody spent 100, somebody spent 50, somebody spent others. And all of a sudden, how much is this thing worth to me? Well, I used to have zero context, and I know an album's worth $10. They're giving it away for me for free, so some people pay zero, some people spend a lot more. What Humble Bundle has used a whole bunch of actually quite sophisticated marketing and psychological tricks to push that price up. So my basic view is that without those tricks, I think it's a big mistake. I think you will devalue what you do. With those tricks, I think it's really, really interesting because it can show people, it can provide the context that me buying a bottle of wine in expensive restaurants or in Lidl's provides me the context of how much I'm prepared to pay. You need that context, and the first pass, pay what you want strategy, doesn't have that context. And without that, I think, for most of you in the room, I think it would be a mistake. If you can think of the context, and frankly, looking at what those people do, but look at Kickstarter. Kickstarter is absolutely full of social proof and context. Look at what people have spent on, and you see it's saying, 100 people have bought this tier. This tier's sold out. Oh, that must be really good. There's only one dress left in the shop. I must buy it right now. All of that kind of stuff. With that, it's worth it. Without it, I think it's a very dangerous strategy. Right. Execution is everything, I suppose, is the answer.
Well, that's a really good question because so someone said that the pressure is going up and the budget are going down. They are now. Digital is great because it allows you to really follow and have data and understand how you reach and how you sell, but it also makes you very accountable for what you pay. So I think the way that we actually sell the plan is by using heavily and relying heavily on econometrics model, because this is something that really helps us justify the spend and determine the ROI of every penny that we invest. Then I'm very curious about the model that you talked about today, because the earned space is very much more difficult to actually measure and therefore sell. So there is always that conversation which is about that kind of seeding, watering analogy that I need to sell into, saying if you want the kind of more basic sales activation layer to work, well, you need to do something about the brand before, because you cannot keep on pushing prices and reasons to travel if actually people don't think about you in a more emotional way first. So this is the hard selling beat, and this is what is being challenged more and more. So any tools actually to help me sell that are welcome.
My only quick one's back to Nicholas was, having never got beyond, I think, level 20 on Candy Crush, and probably because I'm not very good at it, then they start asking you to pay to get to the next levels, etc. Is it typical that within that, specifically within that gaming space, you get the same types of people who keep paying to get up to the next levels? Does it differ across the spectrum?
So how focused are we? Are there just a very small subset of people who spend any money at all? And then are there a whole bunch of people who are just endless freeloaders? So the first and slightly disappointing answer is we don't entirely know. So we tend to know within a company the same customer, but across the entire audience we don't necessarily know. Anecdotally, more helpfully, I have a good friend who ran Channel Flip. He said, I found a whale in Candy Crush, and it's my gran. And she spent several $100s in Candy Crush, and she's never played a game before, and she loves it, and she's really happy. So I can be pretty confident she wasn't previously in the gaming category, and now she is. What we don't fully know yet, and is still, I'm optimistic that what happens is that you come into a game, you play it, you go, I'm never going to become a spender in this place. No context, it's not suited for me, it's whatever. A handful of games a year become a hobby for somebody, and they transition from going, I'm playing this to pass the time, to I'm a Candy Crush player. And then they're happy to spend to give gifts to friends. I mean, one of the joys of Candy Crush, which you won't have found because you quit early, is that every time you come in, there's a little icon flashing, which is an email, and you click on it, and there's lots of lives which have been gifted to you by your friends. The universal thing for life is a heart, so you open it and 8 of your friends have sent you love. It's the first thing that happens. If you're feeling a bit down, you can open up Candy Crush, and the first thing you get leaving inside the sugar rush is the love rush. And that's one of its more powerful things. It's also a vaguely manipulative spend money or viral technique to drive you to connect with your friends. So it's very clever psychologically, but it's also very powerful internally. The next point, we have seen some slightly terrifying data from one particular audience subset, which is 30 million people, which I think is a very small sample, which is kind of how the world has changed, is that only 0.2% of people 0.2% of people represent 50% of all the money made across these games. There were 100 games in that survey, which means none of them were the really big ones, because 30 million people, 300,000 users a game, whereas we're talking 93 million. So it's possible that that was a long tail of not very good games at monetizing. And then I have other games I work in where we have 10% of people converting every month, but we've talked to, through surveys and stuff, we know they don't play anything else. I mean, this is just the only thing they say. Broadly, I think of those 93 million people who come into Candy Crush, there are a lot of people who will never spend, never would have done, never will in the future. And that's okay because of the freeloader strategy. I do think there is a possibility that let's take go to the world of music. When I was growing up, a heavy music fan would buy an album a week, 500 quid a year. Now I can get all of that music for free. A heavy music fan will still spend 500 quid, but they'll spend it on something different. They'll spend it on gigs or T-shirts or limited edition things or whatever. The casual music fan, who would previously have had to spend that money, has dropped out of the music ecosystem forever. They listen to music because music's awesome, but they don't have to spend to listen to that. And I think that will happen to games. I think that the win for games, and indeed most media, is that you broaden your reach, which means you reach new customers. I'm not completely convinced that the move to digital makes your total revenue base bigger forever, because actually there's so much stuff which is free, why would you? That's a very, very sort of long-winded answer, sorry.